Well, hello, everyone. I'm Claude Walters, and this is part of a series that I'm going to be filming of interviews featuring self-published and published authors, very successful authors that will be sharing with us some of their tips and tricks, and also letting us know what brought them to the writing industry and why they wanted to become authors, how it is, what's the journey. And today I'm very, very happy to be, we have someone very special joining us. I'm really excited to introduce her. Debbie Vigué is a very successful New York Times best-selling author with a long list of 5-star rated books on Amazon. So she will be speaking with us about her journey as an author, and what to look for, and what she's enjoyed about the journey, and some tips and tricks probably for some of us who love to write and want to do this as a career. So I'm going to bring her in now.
Hi.
Hello. How are you, Debbie?
I'm doing great. How are you, Claude?
Very, very good. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really happy to have you.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
It is going to be fun. So I'm just going to take you through a couple of questions that I've put together that kind of gives us a good idea of perhaps your writing journey, and all kinds of tips that you might have for people who are considering this as perhaps a career or even just a hobby. So we're going to jump right into it.
Awesome. Sounds great.
There we go. So what was the experience or trigger that created the desire for you to be a writer? So what was that first thing that really inched in you and said, okay, I want to do this for a living. I love this.
Well, I was a voracious reader when I was little, and I had a collection of Breyer horses that I would play with. And every time I would play with my horses, when I got done, I'd put them away, and then I'd get out a paper and pen, and I'd write the story down that I just played out with the horses. And
toy horses?
Yeah, toy horses. The
Breyer awesome.
horses. And I always say I was inspired by the Lone Ranger, because that was the first horse I had, was actually the Lone Ranger's horse, Silver, and that started it all. But then I read a Western, Zane Grey. I read The Lone Star Ranger, which is my favorite book. And when I closed the book and was done reading it for the first time, I said, I want to make other people feel exactly the way I feel right now. And that was it.
And how was that? What did that make you feel like?
It made me feel so excited, and so it fired my imagination, and it made me feel like I had to read more, but there was no more, but it was just like so overwhelming and all consuming.
It kind of, it is, because it's sort of an escapism.
Yeah.
Because you escape to another world when you're reading. That's the beauty of books, right?
It is. And I'm a huge Western fan, so.
So am I. I love, what was the Wayne guy? The old man.
John Wayne.
John Wayne. I loved, the only Westerns that I ever looked at was John Wayne, and then the Clint Eastwood stuff. They called it spaghetti Westerns.
My grandfather actually was an extra in one of John Wayne's first films. And then for The Shootist, they actually filmed that the house he was renting in the film was 3 doors down from my grandparents' house. So,
wow.
My grandfather met him at the beginning of his career and at the end of his career.
Oh my God. What a story.
Yeah, it was really kind of cool.
I bet he told that story a lot.
Yeah.
So is there a genre that you particularly like to write in, and if so, why? What's that genre, and why do you like that so much?
I drive my editors and my agents crazy, because I like to write in most genres, which is not the norm necessarily. But I love writing mysteries and thrillers, but I really like writing dark fantasy. So. And
why is that? Is it because there's a bit of that in you that you kind of get to experience through your writing?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. It's also, the rules are what you make them. You You have to create your own universe, set the rules of how things function, and that is an interesting process. Like you do a normal mystery in the real world, and you can't violate the rules of the real world. You can't sit there and go, well, there's a dead body and nobody cares, or something like that. Or, just make up, random things that are, people sit there and go, that's not true. And that's not how that happens.
Yeah.
And, people have watched enough, mystery shows or cop procedurals or whatever. They're like, no, but when you do fantasy, you're bringing people into your world and you're saying, this is how the world works. And this is what is and is not possible. And there's a creative freedom in that is very liberating.
Because it's your rules.
Yeah.
It's your world. So it can be
my sandbox, my rules.
Right.
On the flip side, I've written tie-in fiction where you write for you write a tie-in book to somebody else's property. I've written a Charmed book, for example. And it's very exciting. And people are like, oh, well, that's great because you've got all the rules. And you're like, yes, but you have to play in someone else's sandbox with their toys. And you have to leave everything exactly how you found it. And you can't, if you violate the least little thing, not only will it not get published, but if it somehow squeaks by, the fans will crucify you. So
yeah, because it's a stringent kind of parameter that you can't. It's fun in a way that you have that, but it can be very limiting, right?
Right. I did that the Charm book because my parents were huge fans of the TV show and I knew the editor, and it worked out really well and I enjoyed myself. But I ended up coming to a screeching halt in my writing because the way the plot went, I got to a point where they needed to take it was the Pied Piper story, and the small toddler showed up on the door and they needed to take the toddler somewhere, and it was before any of the girls had kids, and so I'm like, well, they don't have a car seat. I'm going to get killed if I put a toddler in the car without a car seat. And I just sat and everything came to a screeching halt because I'm like, well, maybe they can conjure a car seat. Well, if I was my magic world, they would conjure a car seat. But in the world of Charm, that's not how the magic worked. And you didn't do anything for personal gain. Literally spent an entire 7 hours trying to figure out how I was going to solve the car seat problem. Until I realized, why don't they borrow one from a neighbor? It was just so dumb. I'm like, if these were my witches, we'd have a car seat.
You would think so, right? Especially how hard they are to install.
Yeah, they wouldn't have dealt that. They would have like abracadabra, car seat there.
That's what I would do. So that brings me to a good one. How do you come up with your stories? Where do they come from?
Everywhere and anywhere. I mean, I have a wildly vivid imagination. So something funny someone says will inspire something, or I hear a song lyric that I find very, powerful or intriguing, and I start contemplating, what would a story be that would match that kind of emotional, essence of that, line. Or, I mean, I've even seen weird things when I was just out, having dinner, and you watch, you're having dinner, you're minding your own business, and then you realize that the people at the next table are just, you're like, what are they doing? Whatever they're doing, it's not normal. It's not natural. They're obviously having some sort of issue, and your mind starts trying to fill in the gaps. You're like, what could possibly be the problem there? What if, and all of a sudden you're off on another story.
So how do you capture that thought, though? Do you walk around with a dictaphone like I do sometimes, or do you write it down? Do you have a little notebook that's always present on you, or how do you capture that?
I have pens. I have so many pens. I have thousands of pens, and I'm not actually exaggerating that. But pens come to me. Watch your loose pens around because they'll vanish.
You're like a pen magnet.
I am a pen magnet. So I've got, at any given time, I have this real teeny tiny purse that at any given time has 5 pens in it,
And paper?
No, not necessarily. Which gets creative because the back of receipts, napkins. I've gotten very desperate at restaurants and went into the bathroom and grabbed paper towels or toilet tissue, and there's this one restaurant we go to that uses butcher block paper as, the tablecloth, and then they tear it up and throw away. I've scribbled all over those things, and they come to clear the table. I'm like, don't take my book.
I've done that.
that's going on with me. And they're like, what is wrong with her? So now they're going, what is wrong with her? You know, and the stories go on. But, and I also, it's funny. I hate carrying around phone. You know, I hate carrying around a phone in public. You know, I'm like, yeah, I don't like being tied to my phone. But the invention of the memo pad with the smartphone is like the greatest thing that's ever happened, because that makes it bearable to have a phone on me all the time, because I'm like, but I can just type up my notes.
That's kind of the only reason that I kind of have it around me all the time, because when I come up with a song idea or an idea, I just go in my dictaphone or my phone and use a voice memo and just, right? So it's easy, it's quick. But then I end up with 30,000 memos I can't remember, and I have to go through them. So
I have the same
it's the better. I think paper is always right. I come back to the notebook and the paper. There's something about writing that's really genuine to me.
It uses a different part of your brain than typing does.
Does it? Oh, really?
Yeah. And so you're
explain that to me, though.
I don't know. I don't know all the science behind it, but you're accessing a different part of your brain when you're physically, you know, writing things out than you do when you're doing this. And so that's part of the reason why some writers gravitate more towards one than the other, is because they've trained their brain for one over the other.
Interesting.
And yeah, I've actually, since I was very young, been writing both on paper and on a typewriter, because my parents got me a typewriter.
The old typewriters?
They got me one of those little suitcase typewriters when I was.
Oh my God.
Right. So I would type also. So I can do either way. But at this point in time, even though I prefer writing it out physically, because I like the connection with the paper and the ink and everything else, I get really, really sick of having to transcribe it into the computer.
Yeah.
So at this point, I usually just go straight for the computer. But I do take my notes in notebooks.
I don't know. There's a kind of a keepsake feeling, right?
Yeah, there is.
So
it's something solid you can hold on to, which is, it also goes to the whole thing of, you know, some people prefer physical books, some people prefer ebooks. And while most people like the sensation of the physical book and opening it and turning the pages, you know, you can't change the font, you know, to make it easier to read. And then you have to find some place in your house to store it, you know. So it's true. But at the same time, there is a value still to the things that are physical, where you feel like, you know, you actually have hold of something. You know?
Well, as I look at your background and mine, I see that we both love books.
Yes.
We both love our physical books.
Absolutely.
I always tell my husband, if we have to go out, if there's a fire in the house, I'll probably grab a wooden box and come back from my books. That's all I care about. That's all I would bring outside. I don't want to lose my books.
That's awesome.
So, do you write for yourself or do you write for your readers? That's a big question that I'm always wondering, should I write for me or should I write for an audience in mind, for a reader in mind? There's two different perceptions or two different theories on this, and I'd like to know what you feel about that.
At the end of the day, you need to be happy with what you're writing. Otherwise, you're never going to get it done, and you're never going to put your heart and soul into it. So you have to be writing for yourself on some level, even if you're hired to write for someone else for something. You know, there has to be an element of you that you're pouring into it, that you care about it. Otherwise, you're not going to give it your best work, no matter how well-intentioned you are. You know, it's just not going to happen. So, but at the same time, I try to keep my readers in mind. Oftentimes, they laugh and they say yes because you're figuring out how you're going to torture us, which is true. I always say, you know, what will make them jump? What will make them cry? What will make them laugh? You know, and so it's a little more organic than that. I don't stop and ask myself those questions, but I'm always trying to amuse myself. And my goal with everything I write is to elicit an emotional reaction from my reader. I want them to experience joy. I want them to experience grief. I want them to experience, you know, passion and surprise and all of those things.
And when you speak about your reader, how did you define that reader? Do you have an image of a physical presence in your head of who that reader is, what they're like, what they love, what they don't like, what they actually physically look like? Do you have because in marketing we call those customer personas, and we try to define them to be really very specific. So do you kind of go with the same approach when you're actually thinking of your reader? Do they have a physical presence in your mind?
Not even remotely, actually.
Okay.
I mean, and in some ways, for me, my reader is um, anybody who has ever read anything ever, even if it was the back of a cereal box.
Okay.
You know, my reader, because I think that the stories I tell have a very universal component to them.
Okay.
They're emotions and situations and things that most people can relate to on some level, even if, they're come from a different culture or a different, background, or have had different life experiences. And what's interesting is, I mean, I know that when you're talking about the persona, it's very funny on some level to me, because one of the complaints I always get from my editors is that, they're like, I love the dialogue, I love the action, I love the pacing. Can you please describe a single character, what they look like? Because I just don't. I don't.
Really? And why don't you?
Part is I don't think of people in those terms. I don't think of people as in terms of eye color, hair color, height.
More personality.
Yeah, it's all about how they sound. What's the rhythm of their speaking? What's
Oh,
their emotional depth? That kind of thing. So I tend to not, so I said, so I mean, I got so frustrated that with a couple of my editors, I'm like, you pick. I don't care. I will never describe a character unless, of my own free will, unless it is a plot device. So
okay.
occasionally that happens. For example, my fairy tale Violet Eyes, the character has violet eyes, and that is actually a big, big plot element.
Okay.
So I actually stopped and said, and then my editor said, "Fantastic. What color hair does she have?" And I'm like, I don't know. Hair is not important.
It's about the eyes.
you know. So the only other times I only describe characters voluntarily on my own free will if it's a plot device, or if I have a particular actor or actress in mind that I would like to play them. So
That's sneaky, but
yeah,
smart.
where I'm like, who would really, really nail this as a performer emotionally, and I could see them doing, and then I describe them.
So there are books when there are books where you don't write for that, but then there are books where you're thinking perhaps at one point this is going to become a screenplay of some sort.
Yeah.
Has it ever happened?
I've been optioned by Hollywood several times. I've had screenwriters do the drafts and the different scripts and everything. I've not made it all the way to film yet, but
Nice.
that's only a matter of time.
Yes. Good answer. So what was absolutely, what was the first book that ever made you cry, and why?
I read, I'm a huge Robin Hood fan, and I finally got hold of a Robin Hood book when I was little. And it was one of those terrible ones that has the ending where he is leached to death by his cousin and dies.
Okay.
I cried. I screamed. We were on a road trip at the time, and I was in the back seat of the car. I attempted to rip the pages out of the book. I was about 8. At which point my mom turned around, and my dad was like ready to pull the car over, because clearly there was something terrible had happened in the back, and they're like, what is going on? And I'm like, how could they kill Robin Hood? How can they not give him a happy ending? I didn't understand, because I love the Errol Flynn movie, and I love the Disney movie, and everything else, and I'm like, I don't get it. I mean, and I'm like, I don't want to rip out the ending. And my parents were very wise people. They're like, we do not deface books, even if we don't like them.
I like your parents.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I when reading your books now, I realize that you don't mind killing characters. So you've lost that loving feeling, I guess, of happy
Well,
endings.
no, no. But here's the thing. And I say this not wanting my readers to get too comfortable. Um,
You never know who
my
you're going to talk.
my series end happily. Not for everyone, but for whoever makes it to the end, they get a happy ending. I also know that my favorite author is Zane Grey, like I mentioned him earlier. He
Yeah.
wrote about 120 books.
Wow.
100 of them ended with, picture perfect, happily ever after endings. 10 of them, he killed the main character at the end, the protagonist. And it was always very upsetting to me, but I always realized the wisdom of what he was doing because I was never complacent when reading one of his books because I never knew if someone would survive. And if you have that realization that your characters that you love aren't safe, then it heightens the sense of danger and jeopardy for your reader.
Yeah, it's like kind of reading through a minefield. You never know.
You never know who you're going to lose.
So,
I
how is
just
your? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just say you never know who you're going to lose before the end, but once we get to the end, somebody's going to be happy. Whoever's still living is going to be good. you know.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. So, tell me a little bit about your writing methodology. So, do you have a sacred space? Do you have a time that you like to write in? Do you like music? What do you use? Like, what's take me from I have an idea to I'm writing to it's done.
Sure. Well, the writing, the initial idea can take place years before I ever sit down and write a word. You know, I literally have, at last count, 1,100 book ideas that I have notes on.
God.
And the notes range from 3 sentences to, 10 pages. Right. And I always say, they're percolating. They're in the back, you're in the subconscious, and sooner or later that book's time will come. And when the time comes, it pops into my head and it's like, now is the time. There are a few books that now, the moment of concept and the moment that now is the time were the same moment, but that's rare. Usually I'm thinking about a book for 5 to 10 years before I write it.
Wow.
So, for example, I have a new book coming out in about a month or so. Uh, Spy Games, My Brother's Keeper. I've had notes on My Brother's Keeper since 2006.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's definitely been percolating.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, because I knew everything I needed to I know about the female hero, but the male hero was a question mark. And then all of a sudden, 2 years ago, I was like, I know who it is. I know who they are. I know how they slot into the universe, and everything else just kind of clicked together. And suddenly, boom. And so when a book's time has come and I sit down to write it, I usually put it together a playlist of music. And I'm a very eclectic library in that regard. People look at my playlist and they go, I don't understand. You have a classical piece of music right next to Italian rock opera, next to heavy metal, next to a country and western song, like boom, boom, boom. And then a Jewish, something like, that you would expect a cantor to be singing, in services. And people are like, I don't understand your playlist. And I'm like, my playlists are designed because every book has a particular emotional beat, an emotional quality that I'm trying to drive home. And all of these songs that I've chosen bring out that same emotion in me that I want to bring out in the book.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. And like I said, I mean, sometimes it's the lyric of a song, sometimes it's the beat, sometimes it's just other aspects of the sound, but whatever it is, it elicits the same emotion as these other songs that are seemingly completely unrelated, different genres, everything else. So I have to, and once I know I have the playlist right, because I spend about a day playing with the playlist where I rearrange the songs so they're in different orders. I get about 2 hours worth of music. And if it's the right playlist and the right songs, once I hit play and I put my fingers on the keyboard and start typing, I no longer even hear the music, and I do not know music is playing until I realize it just stopped 2 hours later.
Wow.
And that's how I know the playlist is right, because it's blending in so seamlessly to my mental
It's like white
energy.
noise,
Yeah. But I
right?
notice if it's not there. And if it's not there, I don't write as fast or as well. So, it's like, it's the soundtrack for my book. It needs to complement, not overpower.
It's
And
strange
then,
to me in a certain essence because um, in regards, we had talked about that before, and you had told me that, and I had tried that, but because of the lyrics in the song, it kept bugging me. I couldn't write because I was following I kept listening to the lyrics, right? So I decided to do playlists that were without lyrics. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to focus. But it just disappears into the
it just
background.
disappears. Yeah. And it's very, very soothing. And occasionally I'll pick songs to represent each character. So for example, I mean, it's a cliche, but it worked out so well for the Crusade series. The werewolf Holgar, his Hungry Like the Wolf is his theme song. Whereas Jamie, the Irish street fighter, it's You Give Love a Bad Name. He is never
Yeah,
romantically involved.
right away, you invoke a strong imagery there.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not like he's never actually romantically involved with any other character, but that song sums his energy up.
Very interesting.
Thank you. So, and I write at all times of the day because I'm constantly working, but I prefer to write at night because no one's calling, no one's coming to the door, no one's emailing.
Quiet.
The cat and the husband are asleep. No one wants anything from me, theoretically. So,
I tend to do the same because only I feel like the whole world's sleeping, and
yeah.
it just calms my mind. Now, you talk about your characters never really having a physical kind of being. I find that when I have stories like you in the back of my head, it's weird, but I feel like these characters are just walking in my head until
Mm-hmm.
they're ready to come out and the story comes out. They're constantly there, kind of just tapping away at me, but I can physically see them in form. I see them as physical beings. So for you, is it the same thing? They're kind of swirling around in your head and just kind of like living in a little piece of your
Yeah.
brain until it comes out?
Yeah. I don't see them. I hear them, where they're
Okay.
like, excuse
Again,
me, when you write my
personality.
book, when you're writing my book, because my book is better than what you're doing right now. I'm like, hey, that's just rude, But
So how
yeah,
do you research your characters when you're writing a book? And like if you're do you research them or they just
I
come
don't.
pre-made?
I don't research characters. I research occupations.
Okay.
Um, so, I mean, there's some things about their job or their daily existence I'll have to research, but as far as the personalities and everything, those just pop out. You know,
Okay. Let me see here. How do you select the names of your character?
that is like the worst thing in the entire universe, because I hate naming characters so badly. I mean, and given how many books I have so many characters, and like even minor characters. I had this problem where I realized in the Psalm 23 universe I had three different cops named Vince, not the same cop,
Oh my
three
gosh.
different ones in a small town, and I'm like, because
What are the
and I
chances?
yeah, I finally had to put together a writer's Bible with all the character names I've ever used in that series, so that I don't repeat the character names.
Oh my
Because
gosh.
I hate naming characters. I'll go to like babynames.com and places like that and I try to find names I haven't used that I like, And that's hard because I also find that in weird ways, I tend to obsess on names that start with the letter C and names that start with the letter J. And I don't know why. It just makes me crazy. So I've actually had contests before where I'm like, you know what?
I was going to ask, did you ever get a
Let me,
reader
yeah,
to just...
yeah, I say, you know, if you win the contest, I'll name a character after you because
That's
I
awesome.
need the help. You know?
Oh, I like that.
Mhm.
So what's your what I call your writing kryptonite? So do you ever get writer's block? And if you do get stuck, do you have a little trick for us that gets you unstuck? For all of us who hit the wall sometimes and just kind of,
If
what do
I
we do?
get boredom is my kryptonite.
I can't see you being bored ever. I have a hard time imagining that.
Great. um, there's scenes and things that you have to do that are you know just kind of getting the business done. They're connecting the exciting,
Oh, now I get it. Yes.
and I always call it like the vast wasteland that is the middle of the book. You know,
Oh
where you
yeah.
have to keep progressing the plot forward, but you know all the excitement's at the beginning and all the excitement's at the end. You know, so what I've found.
You got to fill in the blanks.
Yeah. So what I do is I find ways to amuse and entertain myself. So I'm like, what would throw a monkey wrench into this? You know, what would be, you know, just make craziness happen right now, and that I'd have to deal with it, you know, creatively as a writer. And my readers would go, I didn't see that coming. So you know, my readers have learned to expect the unexpected. I tend to end every chapter on a cliffhanger because I want them to continue reading. I want them to continue reading, and I want to continue writing. So if I write the cliffhanger, I keep writing into the next chapter, even if even if I had promised myself I was going to go to bed after I finished that chapter, I still keep writing because I have to resolve the cliffhanger. And then suddenly I'm working for another 2 hours, you know, and
So
but
you
my
get to the next cliffhanger.
exactly right. This time keep yourself going. Um, and my readers, they sit there going, I was just gonna read so many chapters, and now I was up till 4 a.m. finishing because you kept having all these cliffhangers, and I'm like, good, stay up with me.
It's kind of like I notice that you write like really good series. You
Thank
know,
you.
like I was watching a series. Geez, Sons of Anarchy,
Mhm.
and they tend to finish every episode with this cliffhanger, and you're like, and the same thing happens with your writing, is that you get to the end of the chapter and you're like, well, okay, I just want to know what happens.
Be fun what
But
happens.
then you start, and then it goes and
Yeah,
it dissolves into another one, and you're like, I just gotta put it down for a minute.
yeah, yeah. The goal is to never have you put it down. And also, as far as tricks for writer's block, the best one I can give people is write the exciting parts first. Most people think you have to write linearly, you know, start with chapter one and end with whatever the last chapter is. That's not true. You can skip around and write the parts that interest you and then go back and fill in the rest. The truth is, once you've gotten all your favorite parts written, you've built enough momentum in the story that it makes it easier to go back and write the scenes or the connective material that you were finding was a slog, and it starts to go faster because you literally just picked up speed. And you know, like I said, momentum, you've got the momentum going for you, as opposed to, you know, that first
Trying
scene.
to force yourself to write
Yeah,
something uninteresting.
so I always say skip to the end. And also, don't let yourself get hung up on details while you're writing, because so many times you'll stop and go, what was the name of X, or what is the description of that, or I
How
have
did
to,
they get the baby seat in the car?
yeah, or I have to name a new character. What you do when you come across one of those moments where it's actually going to take you out of writing and into research mode is you don't stop, because if the writing is happening, you got to let it happen.
Yeah.
So what you do is you put a capital T and a capital K next to each other, TK, which is a copy editor's mark, which means to come later. So put TK and then whatever it is. TK, figure out name. TK, insert scene here. TK, blah, blah, and keep writing. And
Okay.
then when you go back, you just do a search for TK. And I will tell you this, in the 70 novels I've written, there is only one book where there ever was a word that had a T and a K in it next to each other, and that was pocket knife. So when you're pretty well assured that you're going to be able to search your manuscript, and the only times you'll ever find a T and a K is your mark saying I need to put something here. So
That's
it
very
makes it very
cool.
fast and very easy.
So it brings to mind some people, and I don't know, I'm pretty new to this, so you tell me what you think about this. Certain people say, okay, do a mind map or an outline of your book and try to figure out, what goes where and what happens. And then other people say, well, do it take some sticky notes, put it on a wall and start kind of, you know, plotting your book that way. What is it that you do? So do you just go ahead and write whatever comes and then reverse engineer, take those things and then fill in what's not done? Or do you actually have an organized way, or for organized anal people like me
I
who had the thought of being, just like that, and just I cringe.
plotter versus pantser, but writing by the seat of your pants, But I actually, it depends on what the book is, because if I'm writing with a co-author, like I've written with Nancy Holder and James Tuck, and I've written with my husband, Scott Vigué, we tend to work up an outline first. 3 points per chapter. This is what's going to happen, so that everyone's in agreement of where the story's going, or
Okay.
at least where we think it's going. And then when you do it that way, you can actually be writing simultaneously. So, like, for example, with Nancy, it was very common that I would write odd chapters and she would write even chapters. And I'd be writing like chapter 3 while she was writing chapter 4, and then we just swap and read them, you know. So you can actually progress together without waiting on each other at that point, which is nice. And also it can make sure everyone's on the same page about where we're heading. When I write for myself, I either have an idea, I know where I'm starting and I know where I'm ending. And the middle is, who knows how we get there. It's a surprise, you know.
It's all
It's
in
a,
the journey, they say.
it is a journey. I don't know how we're getting there. And and it's funny because I have a lot of people who read my mysteries, and here's a bit of a secret, but for everyone watching. But for my mysteries, people say, a lot of your mysteries, I can't figure out who did it until 3/4 of the way through the book, and then I get a better idea. And I said, that's because I don't know who did it. I set up my mysteries with 3 or 4 suspects, and I set up everything around it so that logistically, it
Either
could
one.
be any of them. And I wait until they tell me who did it.
That's
You
kind of
know?
cool.
So
That's really
one of them steps forward and says, I admit it was me. And I'm like, I knew it was you. And they're like, no, you didn't. And I'm like, that's true. But, I figure if I don't know who did it, my readers don't know who did it, you know?
very cool.
But so I usually have a suspicion. I'm like, I think it was, C as opposed to A or B, and most of the time I'm right, but not always. But I write as if it could be any of the 3. And uh, another thing I like to do is, if I have notes about scenes I want to make sure I get in it, I just kind of put a TK and I put them down lower in the document so that I see them as I'm getting to them. Go, oh yeah, I wanted to do something about that because I thought it'd be funny or interesting. Regardless of whether how you do it, especially if you're outlining, you need to allow yourself the freedom to break your outline, to break the plan, because that's when all the greatest stuff happens. My dad laughs because I always call it a left turn. I have the plan, and then suddenly the entire plot turns left, and I'm like, I don't know where this is going now. And he's like, this is when it gets good. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But one of the best examples I have of that is in the Wicked series, the final book of the Wicked series, Wicked Resurrection. We had one of our main characters, Nicole, was in a love triangle with, the guy who was not a good guy, who was not good for her, and the guy who was the paragon of virtue, who was, really good for her.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. the perfect guy and the messed up guy, right? We planned
Oh, let me guess.
since book 2 that she would end up with the perfect guy. We had planned that in book 5 there would be a scene where the two of them were fighting and one of them had to sacrifice himself to save her. And we're like, the perfect guy's gonna live. We're positioning the bad guy in a way that we know he cares about her enough, he'll do it, without thinking. And we're gonna put him in there and we're gonna kill him and it'll be a beautiful moment of redemption for him, blah, blah, blah. Planning this for 5 books, that's, and this whole, 7 years of planning. I was the one who wrote the scene. It was in one of my chapters, and I was typing, and I went, and the wrong guy sacrificed himself. And I actually stopped. And had I been writing, and it's just been my series, I would have just gone, okay, I guess that's what's happening now. Instead, I came to a screeching halt, immediately called Nancy, and I said, Nancy? And she said, you just killed off the other guy, didn't you? And I'm like, how did you know that? And she said, I knew what chapter you were working on today. And I woke up this morning and I knew. And I'm like, well, is this a good thing or a bad thing? And we both we'd never done this before, but we both stopped and we reread the first 4 books in the series and came to the conclusion that although our conscious minds were saying we were going to do this, subconsciously it was there the entire time that we were going to go the other way.
Oh my gosh, really, eh?
And we're like, it doesn't make sense if we stick with the original plan. It doesn't make, so she ends up with the guy that, is like not a good fit for her at all, but it actually works. So
it usually imitates, what do they say?
Art imitates
art
life.
Imitates life.
Yeah.
That's usually the case. Now, what do you think are common traps for aspiring writers? So, the ones that want to write, what do you think is the common thing that you keep seeing? Because I know you do editing for other upcoming writers and authors that want a career. And so what do you see happening every time that you need to, if you had 3 things to tell an aspiring writer right now to be careful about, what would that be?
Don't spend forever on your first book. Your first book, no matter who you are, is crap. I don't care how many books you've read. I don't care how many courses you've taken. I don't care how many times you revised it. It's crap. Okay. There are very few authors that their first book ever sees the light of day. Most authors, you never, ever, no matter how famous they are, the vast majority of them, you never see their first 3 books. Not ever. And not unless they really wildly revise them. Your first 2 books pretty much are crap. It's when you complete your 3rd book that you've gotten enough experience that you have something that's publishable. But people get so caught up in the passion that they have for that first story that they don't let go. They revise it for 10 years instead of moving on to story number 2. And I tell people, I know you love this story. I know you're passionate about this story. If you don't want to just trash it, and forget it, you still need to put it away in your drawer, in your deep, dark file on your computer, and do not touch it until you have written at least 2 other books. And then come back to it and look at it with fresh eyes once you have the experience of actually completing. Because no matter how much you have read, no matter how much you have studied, nothing substitutes for writing projects all the way to completion. And this doesn't matter if it's the same if you're doing short stories or novellas or novels or screenplays, or I would imagine even songs. Until you have the experience of actually completing and moving on and doing something new and something next, you haven't actually gotten yourself to a point where other people can really read it. 3 years ago, I reread the first book I ever wrote, which has not seen the light of day. And I immediately called everyone I ever made read it and apologized. So I thought it was great. And God bless them. No one ever told me. It was your baby. Instead they said, it's okay. We knew you were going to get better.
Well, that's good.
on the other hand, book 3 that I wrote was a vampire story, and it was much better, but it wasn't there. And I ended up reworking it 15 years later, and it became the Kiss trilogy. It went from being one book to being this just spanning one time period to being the Kiss trilogy, which spans like 800 years and was the first Christian vampire fiction that was published traditionally.
Nice.
So, but I went back to it after I had published several other series and had left it alone for, I literally left it alone for about 10 years. So
I think it has something to do with confidence as well, because I remember starting to write the first chapters of the book that you worked together with me, and having to go back, because as I went through the chapters and writing, it almost became like a muscle thing.
Yes.
Right. And at the end, when I read the last one, I just liked it so much. I thought, oh, those are crappy. I have to go back now and rewrite all of that. And so I think it's the same way. The more you write, the better you are at it, the more confident you become into it, the more secure and more comfortable in that new skin of being an author. And I think the more open and the more authentic as a writer, because I think at the beginning you're hesitant. Oh, I can't write that, or I can't write this, or I don't know how to do this, but at the end you really grow your wings and start really owning it. I think it's owning it.
Yeah. It's one of the few careers where the older you get, the better you get,
Yeah, more life experience.
Doesn't matter if you're 60, 70, 80, you're just, you're really mastering it now, so I always say it's one of the things you can do until you die. You don't never retire, because you just are getting better and better and better, because you have the experience, you have all of that, and it is a muscle that you have to work. I also tell people it doesn't matter if you don't think you can be a writer. Anybody can, as long as you're willing to put the effort into practice.
Yeah.
As far as other things, I tell people, grow a thick skin, because people are going to criticize. And the sad truth is, places like Amazon, stuff like that, if someone has something negative to say, they are 10 times more likely to actually bother to say it than if someone has something positive to say. So you have to remember that, the people that liked it are not as likely to actually say so, which is sad.
And it's very subjective, right?
Yeah, it is. And even if you're trying to get traditionally published, 90% of rejection has nothing to do with you or your manuscript. It has to do with things outside of your control. Like, for example, your editor just bought a manuscript that had something similar element to it, or think that's happened to me. Or what else has happened to me is they're no longer going to be publishing that kind of fiction, and they can't tell the public yet, so they just have to tell you no, and they're not allowed to actually tell you why. So there's 1,000 reasons you get rejected that have nothing to do with the quality of your story or the quality of your writing. And even if it does, if they give you advice on how to improve it, listen and take it with a grain of salt. And if multiple people give you the same piece of advice, then maybe you should pay attention to it. Yeah. But you have to learn to embrace the rejection. And the great piece of advice I was given was, if you're trying to get traditionally published, pick a number that's like the magic number for yourself of rejections you're going to get before you get your acceptance. And don't hate yourself and pick a really high number, and don't be unrealistic and pick one, But if you pick a number, what it does, it becomes like a game where every rejection, you're like, yes, it's a stepping stone. I'm almost there. So for me, my lucky number is 13. So I picked 13. And I'm like, I know it's a little on the low side, but I'm just going to step out in faith. And I got my 13th rejection letter, and the next day I had a publishing contract.
You're kidding.
No.
That is so cool. But it's a good way of, again, it's having humor, right? There's a sense of gamification.
You've got to think this is a stepping stone to getting what I want. It's not something standing in my way.
No.
And a lot of people, they can't handle the pain of someone telling them no, or that they don't, and most
Don't be
90% of publishers are not even going to bother to tell you if they don't like it. They'll just say no. So it's not like they're going to tear you apart and tell you that you're a terrible person and go home. You know, this is not like, you know, the paper chase in law school where they say, you know, here's a dime, call your parents and tell them you're flunking out of law school. They're not going to bother doing that, you know. And if
I
they tell
think
you anything at all, then that means they think you have
actually care.
potential and you
Exactly.
should actually pay attention, you know, because they don't have time. They're too busy. So
Yeah,
if they
I
bother
agree.
spending more than the word no on you, that's a good thing. You know, so don't let it get to you. Don't take it personally. Grow a thick skin, and don't read your online reviews if you can help it, or if it's going to make you angry. You know, because
I think anytime you're putting art out there, something that's really subjective, something that is really goes with the person's background, life experience, likes, dislikes. I mean, again, so subjective. You really have to remove yourself from that result oriented thing, because it really isn't like I built a tree house and I built it to spec and everybody should love it because it looks
yeah,
exactly like the picture.
exactly. No,
It's not like that, right?
no,
I'm putting my heart out there.
yeah,
Some people will like it, some people will correlate with it, some people won't at all, and it's okay. It's
yeah.
just do it.
Well,
Just
and
put it
there's
out there.
things like some readers and some editors love flashbacks. Some hate them, you know?
Yeah, you
So,
can't really help that.
no. So if you have a flashback in your story, there is a portion of the population that will hate your book no matter what the rest of it is just because it had a flashback.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing you can do about that.
No.
You just have to tell the best story that you can tell. And third piece of advice is just, you know, it's just don't spend forever researching unless there is a vitally important reason to do so. You know, you want to have accuracy, you know, yes, but unless you're writing a nonfiction treatise on the topic, you know, you don't have to spend 2 years researching your topic.
But
You know,
well, it's funny that you say that, because I was thinking of writing this story about this coroner, and I'm thinking if I start talking about what she's doing or whatever, I have to be factual in a way, because it's not a fantasy coroner. It's a
right?
real one. So I would have to, there's certain times where you do have to get your facts straight, because in a way you don't want the reader to be distracted by reading it and
No,
going, nah, that's I've watched enough CSI to know that this is not true.
right. Yeah,
Right?
you do your due diligence, but you know, you don't panic yourself over it. Because even if you have all the facts right, there are people that will tell you that you're wrong. And I've had that happen. I'm like, really? You know, and it's just like, oh, okay. But and what's great is if you can get somebody who works in the job that you're writing about, you know, I mean, if you can get someone who agrees to answer your questions or, you know, do this or that, I mean, that's fantastic. Um, I actually was very excited because for my upcoming spy novel, My Brother's Keeper, I actually am getting to put in the acknowledgments a thank you to the CIA, because the head of the media department got on the phone with me and answered some of my questions, you know, which is fantastic.
um,
Yeah. And of course, there's a lot she couldn't answer, you know, and
I can imagine.
I'm like, fine, fine. You know. But and then I had in the next book in that series, I had a medical question dealing with allergic reaction to medication, where I needed it to be a similar medication but not the same medication. And I sat there and I'm like, I'm a smart person and I took a lot of science in college, and I could sit there and comb through the internet and comb through medical journals and figure this out.
Or
Or I could text the 3 people that I know that are nurses,
right?
which I did. And I had an answer in 5 minutes while I kept writing.
Yeah. So use your resources is basically what
Use
you
your
get.
resources wisely. You know, you don't have to do all the research yourself, and you don't unless you're doing some very specific historical romances set in specific time periods where those readers get really, really, really picky. Don't don't kill yourself over it, you know?
So can you tell me 3 indispensable tools that you're constantly using as a writer that might be helpful to aspiring writers and authors? And
Honest,
no, you cannot tell me pen.
pen, paper, computer.
Are there online platforms that you like or that you use that are good for you? Not at all?
Coke Zero and Cheez-Its. Because I'm allergic to something in Cheez-Its and it changes my brain chemistry and makes me write faster.
Oh my God, that's funny.
And I tell people, if you can find a sweet fizzy drink to go with a salty, crunchy food, it tends to actually make the writing process go faster. And the funny thing is,
Kill you first.
everyone I've told who's tried that has said you're right.
Oh my God, I'm gonna have to try that now. It doesn't sound very appealing, but I'll give it a go.
Well, it doesn't have to be those particular foods, but I actually now have readers who every once in a while, it's like every once in a while, I have a business address that for sometimes is available for different reasons, and every once in a while I receive packages of industrial sized boxes of Cheez-Its from readers. And I'm like,
Awesome.
message like, we're waiting for the next book. And I'm like,
Oh.
which series? Okay.
Oh.
Like,
Get writing.
I hear you. So yeah, it's important to find the thing that makes you comfortable and happy. I mean, for some people, it's having your desk a certain way. For some people, it's having the right snacks on hand. For me, I can't have too much light shining on my computer because it hurts my eyes. So there's always the war with the blinds and everything like that. But yeah, for me, it's having the right snacks, having the right music, and having the other indispensable tool I have is I have first readers who I actually force to read every chapter as it's written, and then tell me what they liked about it.
Oh,
And
wow.
I give them half an hour to read it, and then I expect a report. And I'm like, I need to know now, and we're going to discuss these elements, and mostly it's because I want the instant feedback of, is it working? Are they liking it? Are they having the emotional reactions I want them to have? And my first readers are all readers who have very different backgrounds and very different tastes when it comes to reading. But they all like my books, but I know that they look for different things in stories, so they're going to be pulling apart at different things. So if everyone's happy, then I've got a winner. I've got a winner. And I've got 2 first readers and 2 secondary readers. Who I usually send them chunks and say, I don't send them chapter by chapter, but I'll they'll get it, more. And then I say, how's it flowing for you? Is it coming together? At that point, I'm looking
have that feedback.
Yeah. So it's good to have someone you trust, and you can use other writers to do that, but other writers are going to try to help you fix your craft.
They're going to edit.
Yeah.
The reader is really going for the story.
Exactly. So that's why I use readers who are not writers.
Yeah. I think that's important because it's the same way when I'm listening to a song. I can't listen like a listener. I'm picking it apart, and I'm thinking of things that are more production and lyric, all these things, performance, whereas a listener is just listening for that connection. Mm-hmm. So it's important to find people that are not doing the craft and more in love with the craft. Mm-hmm. Right? So, which brings me to, you've done it both. You've done the self-publishing route and you've done the big house publishing route. So tell us a little bit about who you're published with and what your experience is, both sides. I know it's a weird situation to be in because you don't really want to knock down one for the other. But if someone's thinking of going, okay, well, I have big dreams and I want, Random House to be publishing my first novel, and I'm not sure I want self-publishing because I think it's not up to par. What's your ideas on that? Now that you've experienced both sides of
Yeah.
that coin.
Well, I've been published by Simon and Schuster, Random House, Penguin, Delacorte, Hachette, Abingdon, Zondervan. Oh gosh, I'm missing Titan. I'm missing at least 2 publishers in there, and I feel bad. So I've been published by most of the big houses and a couple of medium houses. It's a fantastic experience in many ways. There's a lot of eyes on your book, helping you push it to be its best. Making sure that you have caught everything you possibly can, and yet something will always make it into print as a typo. I always laugh and say, 8 people proofed this book, and yet, the day it gets released, I'm the one that gets the email saying, I found a typo on page 40. What's irksome is when that typo is not in my original manuscript. So, like, that wasn't even me, that was the typesetting, or whatever. But no, but I mean, it's nice to have, that kind of support. And modernly, you don't get as much publicity support as you used to, unless you've got a bestseller. Like Wicked, we got a lot of support for book 5 because the series had become a bestseller. But if you're not pushing the next book in a best-selling series or something like that, or you're not a very high-profile author, you're gonna kind of flounder with them not giving you as much marketing support as they would have like 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So most of the burden is going to still fall on you as a writer, which kind of stinks.
For the marketing side, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the marketing side, regardless, is going to fall on you. And most of us writers are like, I don't want to deal with people. No.
Let's say you're introverts.
Yeah, no, not all writers are introverts, and I'm kind of like a 50-50 split, so it depends on my mood. But but at the same time, like, I didn't get into writing books because I wanted to be a marketer.
Yeah.
I'm not into advertising and figuring all that out. That's not,
it's a lot.
Stories, it's, but the modern writer, regardless of if they're published by a big house or published by themselves, has to be their own marketer, their own advertiser, their own cheerleader.
So what's the point in doing it then, if you're going to be doing most of the marketing work? So
it's easier to get into some venues, some bookstores, some libraries, things like that. It's also they'll handle all of the formatting and all of the they'll get the cover done for you, and you don't have to deal with the details like that, which can be a pain. And they cost money. Cost money to have a cover made, and everything else. So dealing with a publisher, you don't have that burden on you. And when you deal with a publisher, you also get an advance, which is them giving you some amount of money and advance against royalties, saying, this is, what you can live off of until hopefully the book makes money. And if you don't earn your advance, say they give you $5,000, and which is fairly normal. I mean, it can go lower, it can obviously go higher, but 5,000 is not unheard of. I mean, that's a fairly standard opening kind of thing.
Okay.
Say they give you $5,000 for a book, and say for whatever reason your book bombs and the royalties you would have earned on that book only come up to $1,000. You don't have to pay them back.
You don't owe them that $4,000.
You don't owe them the $4,000. You just never get more money from them.
Ever again.
Ever again. Right? So on one hand, the gamble worked in your favor. That's one of those, like, the gamble worked for you. You sold 5 copies all to people but you made you $5,000, because the publisher was willing to take a risk. It's who's taking, so they're taking the risk and you're getting paid regardless of if it does well or not.
Okay.
However, they are going to keep a much higher percentage of the money if you do well. So if you, given that marketing is on you already, if you're confident in your ability to sell a lot of copies, it probably behooves you to actually look at self-publishing, because you will keep a much larger percentage of the money for yourself.
For your royalties.
For your royalties, yeah.
Okay.
Because a book that you might get $1 a book for with a publisher, you could get $5 without.
Yeah.
So you start to do the math, and you start to say, well, what other benefits are they going to offer you? Are they going to work to get you audiobook deals, or are they going to work to get you foreign sales or not?
Mm-hmm.
You know, are they going to actually pay money to get bookstores to advertise you or not? You know, so it's things like that to kind of take a hard look at, and then you say, what is your ultimate goal? If your goal is to be published by somebody who was not you, somebody else to agree that this was a good thing and a good idea, and to see it in a bookstore, and tell all your friends, then great. If your goal is to make a living as a writer,
yes,
and you don't care about the prestige, you don't care if somebody in the industry declares you as great or not, then you might want to just go the self-publishing route, where you can get your book to the reader faster, and keep more of the every sale for yourself.
So if somebody, we'll go from there. If someone really is wanting to do a career as a writer, what are some supplemental ways that a writer can earn a living with their writing while they're actually writing their first novel? Are there things that you've kind of come across that have been able to help you as a writer as you go through that journey?
Yeah, there are other writers out there who need things done, like editing, if you're good at editing, or sometimes people will just pay to have a beta reader read, things like that. There are the back cover copy of a book, where you read the blurb. On a professionally published book, 95% of the time, that is never written by the author. That's written by somebody in-house. So when you're looking at other self-published authors, sometimes they want somebody who's going to write that for them. Sometimes they'll take a crack at it themselves. Sometimes they want somebody else. Or some other writers might want help with marketing, or they might want help with, figuring out how to do advertising. And when you help other writers do that, you learn how to do it for yourself. You also can find jobs doing freelance, like advertising writing. Newsletter writing is a big one, especially if you can, you have any kind of skills on the computer with, a couple different programs, you can put something together. There are people who just are willing to pay through freelance sites and stuff like that to have their websites proofread, or, cleaned up, or made nicer, or, they're looking for someone to make it, to make the prose sing, or they're at least looking for someone to figure out which one of their links are broken.
Yeah.
I've had several people I've worked for where they're like, I need help with my website. And I say, define help. And they're like, well, here's my website. And it looks pretty until you realize that, the copy's boring. There are typos all over the place because whoever originally did it was translating from some other language.
Yeah.
And 2/3 of the links are broken. And you're like, I helped someone who was like, they had a big, Instagram was a very big thing to them. And not one of the Instagram links on their website worked, and they didn't know it.
Oh, gosh.
And I'm like, that's a nightmare waiting to happen. But, so.
All good ideas.
Yeah, you can do these kinds of things. You can also, you look at, even, say your church doesn't have a newsletter, or or ask if they need help with their bulletin. Usually that falls on like the secretary, but maybe they're willing to outsource some things, or to just make life easier on the people that are working there. So you look around, and it's like everywhere you look, somebody needs something written. They
True.
need it for website. They need it for their newsletter. They need it for their menu.
Sales copy, pamphlets.
Restaurants need it
Flyers.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, and you just start to get creative, and there are places where you can network online, freelance job sites that can connect you with employers while you're looking to do that. The thing you want to remember is, yes, it's important to make a living, but at the same time, don't let yourself be so all consumed by everybody else's work that you never do yours.
Yeah. You need to carve out a certain time that you say, okay, these are the blocks for them. This is the blocks for me.
Right. Otherwise, you kind of, you've gotten away from what you were trying to do in the first place.
I agree.
But everything you do to help somebody else will also help you as far as making you a stronger writer, a more well-rounded writer. You can also go after the short story market, because, short stories pay anywhere from, 10 to high end is like $50 for a short story in an anthology. But, you can keep at them. And if you do enough of them, that helps your reputation. You can, there's magazines that still need short stories and poetry and things like that. It's just, when you have to start, kind of opening your eyes and say, what involves putting two words together?
Yeah. All great suggestions. I love it.
Thanks.
And then it goes with what I keep telling people is that, everyone always asks me, like, what do you think is successful in life? And I always say, being joyful and passionate about something. And if you're passionate about writing, you'll figure out a way. The money will come because you'll be passionate about doing it. You'll enjoy doing it, and you'll figure out a way to make it work. It's always way better to do that than to work at something that you hate and it's killing your soul. Right? So sometimes you have to make the choice of, it's that transition period that's a little difficult, because you go from maybe a good salary to not such a good salary, but the compensation of being joyful and happy and passionate kind of takes over that transition period, and it's really worth it, I think, in the end. So what does literary success look like to you?
That's an excellent question. Obviously, hitting the New York Times bestseller list was huge, because that's like, the pinnacle.
How did you find that out? What was that moment like?
It's hilarious. My editor called, and I had never spoken to the man on the phone. He was my current editor at Simon & Schuster. And he called, and I'm like, why is he calling? That's just odd. And so I answered the phone, and it's him. And he's like, hi. And he's like, Debbie, I have great news. You made it onto the New York Times bestseller list. And I just sat there for a moment, because I had no book that had just been released. I had books that were coming out, but nothing that was, within the last, 4 months, and certainly not with him. And I'm like, for what? And he said, for Wicked. And I'm like, for what? Because Wicked at that point had been out for 7 years.
And you just made it there?
And just made it.
Like that?
Yeah.
Out of the blue?
Yeah. It was a total shocker. And I was like, really? And he's like, yes, congratulations. I'm emailing you the list. Because, the publishers, the New York Times emails the publishers the week before it comes out, so that they can take advantage of it, And so I was like, so he sent me the thing that he got, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there it is, And I was so excited. And I called my co-author, and she was just screaming in the car, and she's like, this can't be right. And and he had left a message on her home phone, and she's like driving and trying to get home so she can see the email and hear the message, because she was refusing to believe it was true. It was so funny. And so I had to stay on the phone with her until she got home, because she was like, so it was very exciting. And then it became, it was down there for several weeks. So it became the weekly call. Congratulations.
Wow.
Thank you. And then we, so that was pretty awesome. So that that's awesome. That to me was definitely success. Success is also, it's success every single time I get an a message from someone going, how could you, I was up till 4 a.m. reading, and now I'm at work. To me that is also success, because I'm like, that's, you know, that's what it looks like on the personal level. That's how I'm, you know, impacting the individual reader, and that feels really good.
Absolutely. So what are you working on now?
Oh my gosh, so many things. I'm working on the second Spy Games book. I'm working on the 20th Psalm 23 book. I'm working on the second Spice of Life book. And I am working on the 6th Sweet Season book. I tend to write books concurrently.
Okay.
So
That's a lot of writing.
it is.
How do you keep it straight from going like, does it never get to a point where it feels like you've got, 6, 7, 8 stories going on, and then they dissolve into one another?
Never does, but I also read the same way since I was a kid. You know, I had a book for the bedroom, a book for the living room, a book for the car,
Really?
school.
And you could segment all that in your head without getting them confused.
Yeah. My problem comes where you know how I said earlier, I have that problem with naming characters, you know, with like the letter C. The star of Psalm 23 is Cindy. Her the star of Sweet Seasons is Candace, but everyone calls her Candy. So it's amazing when I write those books to get the same time how many Candy Cindy swaps I end up with, because it's one letter difference.
Jeez.
And then Spy Games has a character named Sandra. I was so proud of myself. It started with an S. And not even thinking about the fact that I had Samantha in Witch Hunt, but Sandra, whose family calls her Sandy. So I had readers going through going, found another Cindy instead of Sandy. That's the only problem I have, is typing the wrong name when the names are too similar to each other.
So if you had to start your career all over again, now that you've done over 60 books, you've done this for many years now, you're super successful at it. If you had to do it again, what would you do differently? Or would you do anything differently? Would
I
you think
would have,
everything that happened got you where you are today? And you wouldn't.
well, there is that. You know, there's the thought that if you change something, it changes everything. If I was starting fresh today, though, I would allow my agents and my editors to brand me, so that I was known for one thing and not for everything, because
Okay.
it does make it harder to keep your readership. You know, I've gotten a lot of my readers to follow me, you know, from different genres, but they're not always even aware. You know, they're not looking outside their genre to realize. So that's an uphill battle. Um, I also, as part of that, would probably branch out and have several different pen names so that I could indulge my desire to write in several different genres. And I would choose names that were much easier to remember. There is a great deal of pride and excitement in having your own name on a book. People always ask me, do you write under your name? I'm like, yes, I do. My name is right out there. And I was really silly with the first book and said, can you even get the accent mark on the E? And they did. And my gosh, that has caused so many problems, because there are so many databases that can't figure out what that character is. And it comes up as a weird symbol, you know.
Yeah, true.
And then, and worse yet, nobody can pronounce Vigué or spell it. So it's caused some difficulty with getting and retaining, you know, people that I see, you know, live appearances or conventions, because they can't quite keep hold of the name. You know, it's not a nice, you know, easy name to remember. So I
Gene
would,
Smith.
yeah, Gene Smith. I would
I
write,
understand what you're saying.
yeah, I'd write under Debbie Vigué for something very specific, and then I'd pick several different pen names for all my other genres, and I'd make them really, really easy to remember.
And you keep them separate so that you could basically groom each niche that you were in.
Yes, exactly.
So why do you not do that now? Or
Because
do
I refused to let it happen early in my career, and now it's pretty much just, you know, I,
Too much work.
yeah, it's, you know, I've got so many different series and so many different genres. I write thriller, I write mystery, I write epic dark fantasy, I write urban fantasy, I write horror. I'm about to write westerns. I write young
Children.
adults. I write coming of age. I'm starting to write children's books. So it's kind of like, look, it's the all-in-one writer, you know. So I'm starting to get that. I don't care what you read, you can read me. So
But it's because you write good stories, so it really doesn't matter the genre that you choose because the story is there. The element of that captivating
yes,
essence that you have that keeps us going.
that's what I've managed to the readers that have pulled across all the genres have realized is it's not about the genre, it's about who wrote it. You know, because they look to my books to have certain qualities, and regardless of genre, my books have those qualities always. You know, light will always triumph over dark, you know, and things of that nature.
Yes, I like that.
Thanks.
So do you teach your craft or offer services online to help writers?
I do. I have a writing course that I offer, and I also do freelance editing, things of that nature. Trying to help people, you know, who want to get their book out there, but you know, need a little assistance doing so, or need a cheerleader.
It's always warranted.
Yeah, those can be found. You know, a lot of that can be found on my website or contact me through Facebook.
Perfect. So I have, if people are watching, I believe they can see a ticker that's going across the screen that says learn more about Debbie Vigué by visiting her website at www.debbievigué.com. No accent.
Yeah, no,
I don't
not
think
the
it'll
website.
take it. No. So do we have a little bit of a giveaway or a discount or promotion? What are we doing today to make people happy?
I'm giving away 3 ebook copies, so to 3 different people,
Yay,
of
people.
The Spice of Life, which is a Salty Tale mystery. It's book number 1 in the Salty Tale mysteries. Book number 2 is coming later this year, and it's very exciting. The heroine is a woman who runs a spice shop, not of her own choosing. She is a kind of a pariah in her small town because everyone thinks she killed her husband.
Oh,
She didn't, but wishes she had.
okay.
And yeah, yeah. So it was his small town that he drug her to, and then vanished and left her kind of stuck. And so she's a bit of so she's a bit of an outcast in the spice shop, and she gets help to do inventory from a drifter who has a mysterious past. And the moment they go to the shop to get things started in chapter 1, the shop's been broken into and there is a dead body.
Okay.
Worse yet, the dead body belongs to one of her husband's best friends who was a police deputy.
So that's quite a mix.
Yeah.
So that should keep us going.
It's a lot of fun, and I get to play with my love of finishing salts and seasonings and things like that with the book. So it sounds like a cozy setup. It's got a lot more thrills than that.
Perfect.
It's a lot of blood, a lot of guts. You know, people die.
We like
people
that.
in danger. You know, anyone who's read my book.
Turner.
Yeah, it's a page turner because we don't know if our heroes are going to make it out alive, you know, or if they should.
Yes. So I'm going to say here, so what we're going to do is whoever wants to participate in the giveaway, all they have to do is send me an email at Claude Walters with an S at gmail.com. So that's KLAUDEWALTERS at gmail.com. And in the subject line of your email, just simply say book giveaway. And what we're going to do is we're going to wait a week or two to get this, to have people participate as much as possible. And then we're going to draw someone and we'll send them the book.
Yep, it's going to be awesome.
So let me see if we've got any comments. So I have a comment here. Oh, great job. That's awesome. Thank you very much. Good for you. Now we're going to have you back, Debbie. I'd like to make some series on the development of genres, or to talk more about niche things. I wanted this interview to be really in depth about you and getting people to really get to know you as a writer, and give us a perspective on your past and your journey as a writer. But I think the next series, I'd like to really pinpoint and perhaps help our audience with certain writing elements, or how to develop character, or how to develop a plot, or certain things like that that would be interesting to the audience that I'm trying to kind of capture here and help.
Absolutely. That would be fun.
Well, I want to thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for coming and listening to this wonderful interview today. Thank you to Debbie for your time today, your graciousness in answering all my questions, and sharing all of your experience and knowledge. And it's been amazing. I really enjoyed it.
I've had a great time. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, and have a great time, guys. And we will be coming back soon with another series with Debbie a little bit later on. So have a great weekend, everybody, and thanks again.
Keep reading.
Keep reading.